It was one of those lazy Tuesday afternoons, the kind where time seems to stretch endlessly. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the quiet suburban streets of Willow Creek Estates. Everything was peaceful, too peaceful, really. That's why the sudden knock on the door caught him completely off guard. Alex Carter had spent most of his life wearing a badge and serving his community as a sheriff. Now retired, he enjoyed the slower pace of life in this cozy neighborhood. His days were filled with gardening, reading old case files, and occasionally reminiscing about the adventures and challenges of his past career. But today, nothing unusual was on the agenda. He wasn't expecting visitors, deliveries, or even a phone call. So when that firm knock echoed through the house, curiosity got the better of him. He walked over to the door, peering through the peephole before opening it. Standing there was a man dressed in what looked like some sort of uniform, a plain polo shirt with a patch stitched onto the chest. The patch read, Willow Creek Homeowners Association. At first glance, the guy seemed legit. He carried himself with an air of authority, holding a clipboard under one arm and flashing what appeared to be a shiny badge clipped to his belt. "Good afternoon, sir," the man said, his voice steady but not overly warm. "I'm Officer Jenkins from the HOA. I need to speak with you regarding a few compliance issues we've noticed concerning your property." Alex raised an eyebrow. Compliance issues? He glanced down at his neatly trimmed lawn, the freshly painted mailbox, and the well-maintained shrubs lining the driveway. Nothing stood out as problematic. Still, something about this whole situation felt off. Maybe it was the way the man avoided making full eye contact, or how his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Or maybe it was the badge itself. It gleamed, a little too brightly, almost like it had been polished just moments before arriving at Alex's doorstep. Despite his instincts telling him to tread carefully, Alex decided to play along, for now. After all, he'd dealt with enough tricky situations in his line of work to know that sometimes patience paid off. "Sure. Come on in," Alex said, stepping aside to let the man enter. As they moved toward the living room, Alex couldn't help but notice the stranger's body language. There was a slight stiffness in his movements, and his hands gripped the clipboard a little too tightly. It was subtle, but Alex knew better than to ignore such signs. Years of interrogating suspects had taught him that people often betrayed themselves through small gestures, no matter how hard they tried to hide their nerves. Once seated, the man launched into his spiel without missing a beat. "As I mentioned earlier, there have been complaints about certain violations on your property. Specifically, your mailbox is slightly tilted, which goes against our guidelines for curb appeal. Additionally, the shrubs near the sidewalk are encroaching beyond the permitted boundary." Alex listened intently, nodding occasionally while mentally dissecting every word. He'd lived in this neighborhood long enough to know the rules inside and out. And yet, none of this sounded familiar. Not only that, but the tone of the man's voice struck him as rehearsed, almost robotic. It lacked the genuine concern someone might expect from an actual representative of the HOA. To test the waters, Alex leaned forward slightly and asked a question. "Can you clarify exactly which section of the HOA guidelines these violations fall under? I'd like to review them myself." The man hesitated, his confident demeanor faltering for just a fraction of a second. Sure," he stammered, flipping pages on his clipboard. "Let me find that for you." But Alex could already tell the answer wouldn't satisfy him. This wasn't just a routine visit. Whoever this guy was, he wasn't here to enforce harmless neighborhood rules. Something bigger was going on, and Alex intended to get to the bottom of it. The man calling himself Officer Jenkins was starting to sweat. It wasn't noticeable at first, just a faint sheen on his forehead that glistened under the soft light of Alex's living room. But as Alex continued to ask pointed questions, the cracks in Jenkins' story began to show more clearly. The clipboard he held started trembling ever so slightly, and his rehearsed answers grew shorter and less convincing with each passing moment. Alex leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms casually. He didn't need to say much. His silence spoke volumes. Years of experience had taught him how to let people unravel themselves without needing to push too hard. He watched as Jenkins flipped through the pages of his clipboard, pretending to search for something important. But it was obvious. He wasn't finding anything because there was nothing legitimate to find. "So," Alex said finally, breaking the growing tension in the room, "you're telling me my mailbox is tilted? That's the big issue here?" Jenkins nodded quickly, eager to latch onto any thread that might steer the conversation away from his shaky foundation. "Yes, sir. It's a minor thing, but it does affect the overall aesthetic of the neighborhood." Alex chuckled lightly, though. His eyes remained sharp. "Aesthetic, huh? You know, I've lived here for years and no one's ever mentioned anything about my mailbox before. In fact, I thought it looked pretty good. Straight enough, at least." Jenkins shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his fingers gripping the edge of the clipboard tighter. "Well, sometimes these things slip past inspections until they become noticeable." "Noticed by who?" Alex asked, raising an eyebrow. "You said there were complaints. Who complained?" That question seemed to throw Jenkins off balance, completely. His mouth opened, then closed again, like a fish gasping for air. For a brief second, panic flashed across his face, but he quickly masked it with another forced smile. "It's anonymous feedback," he muttered, avoiding Alex's gaze. "We don't disclose the names of residents who report issues." Now Alex was certain. This guy was full of it. Anonymous feedback? In Willow Creek Estates? This wasn't New York City or some bustling metropolis where neighbors barely knew each other. Everyone here knew everyone, at least well enough to recognize when someone was lying about receiving complaints. Alex decided to press further. "All right, let's talk about those shrubs you mentioned earlier. How far are they encroaching? Do you have measurements?" Jenkins blinked rapidly, caught off guard by the sudden shift in topic. Yes, of course," he stammered, fumbling with the papers on his clipboard again. "They're, about 6 inches over the boundary line." 6 inches? Alex repeated, feigning surprise. "That's awfully specific. Did you bring any documentation proving that measurement? Photos, maybe? A written report?" The color drained from Jenkins's face. He hesitated, then shook his head slowly. "No, not with me today. But rest assured everything has been documented properly." "Properly?" Alex echoed, his tone calm but laced with skepticism. "Because if you're accusing me of violating HOA rules, I'd expect you to have proof. Otherwise, it feels like you're just making things up as you go along." At this point, Jenkins was visibly sweating. Beads of perspiration trickled down his temples and his hands trembled as he adjusted his collar. Clearly, he hadn't anticipated running into someone like Alex, someone who wouldn't simply roll over and accept whatever nonsense he spouted. To make matters worse, Alex noticed something else. Jenkins kept glancing toward the door, as if calculating how quickly he could escape if things went south. It was a telltale sign of guilt, one Alex had seen countless times during interrogations in his days as a sheriff. People always looked for exits when they felt trapped. And Jenkins was no exception, but Alex wasn't ready to let him off the hook yet. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, narrowing the gap between them. "Listen," he said, his voice firm but measured. "I appreciate your concern for the neighborhood. Really, I do. But if you want me to take this seriously, you'll need to provide some actual evidence. Otherwise, I'm afraid we're wasting each other's time." Jenkins swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "I understand," he mumbled, his confidence crumbling like sandcastles against the tide. "Maybe I should double-check the records and get back to you later." "Oh, I think you should," Alex replied, standing up from his chair. His towering presence filled the room, making Jenkins shrink back instinctively. "And next time, come prepared, or better yet, send someone who actually knows what they're talking about." For a moment, neither of them moved. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the kind that made every second feel like an eternity. Then, without another word, Jenkins scrambled to his feet, clutching his clipboard like a lifeline. He muttered a hasty goodbye and practically bolted out the door, leaving Alex alone in the quiet living room. As the sound of retreating footsteps faded into the distance, Alex allowed himself a small smirk. Something about this encounter gnawed at him, though. It wasn't just the absurdity of the claims or the nervous behavior of the supposed officer. It was the underlying motive. Why had this man targeted him specifically? What was he hoping to achieve? Whatever the reason, Alex knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After Jenkins had made his hasty exit, Alex stood in the middle of his living room staring at the closed door. The encounter left a bad taste in his mouth. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, not just because of the man's shaky story or his obvious lack of preparation, but because it seemed personal. This wasn't some random HOA inspection gone awry. There was more to it than that. Alex could feel it in his gut, the same instinct that had served him so well during his years as a sheriff. He walked over to the window and peeked through the blinds, watching as Jenkins practically sprinted to his car. The man fumbled with his keys twice before finally managing to unlock the door and drive off in a hurry. It was almost comical how flustered he'd become. But Alex didn't laugh. Instead, his mind raced with questions. Who was this guy, really? And why had he shown up at Alex's house with such a flimsy excuse? The retired sheriff turned away from the window and let out a deep sigh. He knew he couldn't ignore what had just happened. If this man truly believed he could intimidate Alex into compliance with fake violations, then he clearly underestimated who he was dealing with. Alex wasn't just any homeowner. He'd spent decades enforcing laws, reading people, and sniffing out deception. He wasn't about to let someone like Jenkins get away with whatever game he was playing. With a determined look on his face, Alex headed down the hallway toward his office. It was a small room tucked away at the back of the house, filled with mementos from his career, old photographs, commendations, and a few keepsakes that reminded him of the life he'd led before retirement. Among those items was something particularly meaningful, a genuine sheriff's badge. It sat proudly on a shelf, polished to a shine, a symbol of everything Alex had worked for during his time in law enforcement. He reached up and took the badge, in his hand, feeling its weight. For a moment he simply held it, letting memories wash over him. Then, with a firm nod to himself, he slipped it into his pocket and returned to the living room. Whatever this Jenkins character thought he was doing, Alex was going to make sure he regretted showing up at his door. When the phone rang a short while later, Alex picked it up without hesitation. On the other end was an old friend from the local police department, someone he trusted implicitly. After exchanging pleasantries, Alex got straight to the point. "Hey, I've got a situation here. A guy claiming to be from the HOA just showed up at my place. Something about him didn't sit right with me, so I need your help looking into it." His friend listened carefully as Alex explained the details of the visit, the suspicious behavior, the lack of evidence, and the phony badge. By the time Alex finished, his friend sounded intrigued. "That does sound fishy," he said. "Let me see what I can dig up. If this guy's running some kind of scam, we'll find out." Alex thanked him and hung up, feeling a bit more reassured. Knowing his former colleagues were on the case gave him peace of mind. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that Jenkins's visit was only the beginning of something bigger. Whoever had sent him clearly wanted to rattle Alex, and they'd chosen the wrong person to mess with. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Alex decided to take matters into his own hands. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, walking around his property to inspect every inch. Sure enough, there was nothing remotely close to what Jenkins had described. His mailbox stood perfectly upright, and the shrubs near the sidewalk were neatly trimmed. Everything looked exactly as it should, but Alex didn't stop there. He wandered over to his neighbor's house next door and knocked on the door. "When Naaki Yazai," the elderly woman answered. He greeted her warmly. "Evening, Mrs. Thompson. Did anyone come by earlier today asking about my property?" Mrs. Thompson frowned, shaking her head. "No, dear. No one's been here." "Why do you ask?" Alex smiled reassuringly. "Oh, it's probably nothing, just checking." As he walked back home, Alex realized something important. Jenkins hadn't done his homework. If he'd really been sent to cause trouble, he would. have known better than to fabricate complaints without even attempting to gather intel from neighbors first. That sloppiness told Alex two things. First, Jenkins wasn't very good at his job. And second, whoever was pulling the strings behind the scenes wasn't operating with much skill either. By the time Alex settled back into his armchair, his mind was buzzing with possibilities. He pulled out the sheriff's badge again and held it up to the light, turning it over in his fingers. There was power in that little piece of metal, not just authority, but also the weight of responsibility. It reminded him of all the times he'd stood up against injustice, protected the innocent, and uncovered the truth when others tried to hide it. If Jenkins came back, or if anyone else tried to push their luck, Alex would be ready. With a satisfied grin, he placed the badge on the coffee table where it gleamed under the soft glow of the lamp. Let them try their tricks again, he thought. They'd learned soon enough that messing with a retired sheriff wasn't something to take lightly. The next morning, Alex woke up with a sense of purpose. He wasn't the kind of person to sit around and wait for things to happen. He preferred taking action. After brewing himself a strong cup of coffee, he sat at his kitchen table and pulled out a notepad. Years of solving cases had taught him that even the smallest details could lead to big breakthroughs. If Jenkins was part of some larger scheme, Alex intended to find out who was pulling the strings. While sipping his coffee, he replayed the previous day's encounter in his mind. The nervousness, the shaky badge, the vague answers, it all pointed to someone trying too hard to look official. But why target him specifically? What made him stand out from the other residents in Willow Creek Estates? Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about his mailbox or shrubs. There was more to it, something personal. His phone buzzed just as he was jotting down notes. It was his friend from the police department calling back. "Hey, I've got some news," the voice on the other end said. "Turns out there have been reports of similar incidents in neighboring communities. Some guy posing as an HOA representative has been showing up at people's houses, making bogus claims, and pressuring them into paying fines or making unnecessary repairs." Alex frowned. "Sounds like our guy. Any leads on who he is?" "Not yet," his friend admitted. "But we're looking into it. In the meantime, keep your eyes open. If he shows up again, don't hesitate to call us immediately." "Will, too," Alex replied before hanging up. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. So Jenkins wasn't working alone. Or at least, he wasn't the first one to pull this stunt. Whoever was behind this operation clearly thought they could exploit unsuspecting homeowners without facing consequences. They were wrong. Later that afternoon, Alex decided to pay a visit to the actual HOA office. He figured it wouldn't hurt to verify whether Jenkins had any connection to them. When he arrived, the receptionist greeted him warmly. "How can I help you today?" she asked. "I'm here to check on something," Alex explained. "Yesterday, a man claiming to be from the HOA came to my house. He said his name was Officer Jenkins. Do you know anyone by that name?" The receptionist furrowed her brow. "Officer Jenkins? No, we don't have anyone by that title or name. Our staff members are all listed on our website, along with their contact information." Alex nodded, unsurprised. "Thanks for confirming, just wanted to make sure." As he left the office, Alex felt a surge of satisfaction. Jenkins was definitely a fraud. Now the real question was who had sent him, and what did they hope to gain by targeting Alex? That evening, Alex received another unexpected visitor. This time, it wasn't Jenkins. It was the neighbor 2 houses down, a middle-aged man known for being somewhat confrontational. Let's call him Mr. Grady. Over the years, Alex and Mr. Grady hadn't exactly seen eye to eye. Their disagreements usually revolved around trivial matters like noise complaints or parking spaces, but nothing serious enough to warrant animosity. Still, Alex couldn't deny that there was a certain tension between them. When Alex opened the door, Mr. Grady stood there with arms crossed, wearing a scowl. "I heard you've been causing trouble," he said bluntly. "Excuse me," Alex replied, raising an eyebrow. "That HOA guy came by yesterday. Word travels fast around here. People are saying you gave him a hard time, accused him of lying. You're stirring up drama, and frankly, I'm tired of it." Alex studied Mr. Grady carefully. His tone was aggressive, but there was something else beneath the surface. Nervousness. Was it possible that Mr. Grady had hired Jenkins to harass him? The thought lingered in Alex's mind as he responded calmly. Listen, I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I simply asked for proof of these so-called violations. Isn't that reasonable? Mr. Grady shifted uncomfortably. Reasonable or not, you're making waves. Just leave things alone, all right? Nobody wants problems. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Alex standing in the doorway. Something about the conversation felt off. Why would Mr. Grady care so much about Alex questioning Jenkins unless he had something to hide? Back inside, Alex grabbed the sheriff's badge from the coffee table and held it in his hand once again. Its weight reminded him of the countless times he'd faced bullies and liars during his career. This situation wasn't any different. Someone was trying to intimidate him, and Alex refused to back down. The next day, Alex decided to dig deeper. He started by talking to a few other neighbors, casually bringing up the topic of the HOA visit while pretending to seek advice. Most of them hadn't encountered anyone resembling Jenkins, which only reinforced Alex's suspicion that he was being singled out. However, one neighbor mentioned hearing rumors about a local dispute involving property boundaries, a long-standing issue between two households in the area. Could that be the root of the problem? Determined to get answers, Alex paid another visit to Mr. Grady later that evening. Knocking firmly on the door, he waited until the man appeared, looking irritated. "What now?" Mr. Grady snapped. "We need to talk," Alex said evenly. "About the HOA guy, and why you seem so invested in this whole thing." For a moment, Mr. Grady looked like he might slam the door in Alex's face. But then his shoulders sagged and he stepped aside reluctantly. "Fine, come in." Inside, Alex cut straight to the chase. "Did you hire that guy to come after me? Because if you did, you should know it won't work. I've dealt with worse than amateurs flashing fake badges." Mr. Grady hesitated, glancing toward the floor. Finally, he sighed. "All right, yes. I hired him. But it's not what you think. I'm sick of your smug attitude, always acting like you're better than everyone else. I just wanted to teach you a lesson." Alex shook his head slowly. "You went through all this trouble because of some petty grudge? Hiring a con artist to harass me isn't teaching anyone a lesson. It's breaking the law. You realize that, right?" Mr. Grady paled. "Look, I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Well, it has," Alex interrupted. "Here's how this is going to play out. You're going to publicly apologize for sending that guy to my house, and you're going to drop whatever vendetta you've got against me. Otherwise, I'll report everything to the authorities, and trust me, they won't take kindly to fraud." Defeated, Mr. Grady nodded. "Okay, fine. I'll do it." The next morning, Alex woke up feeling a mix of satisfaction and unease. Satisfaction because he'd uncovered the truth behind Jenkins's visit. Mr. Grady's petty grudge had been exposed for what it was. Unease because he knew this wasn't just about one man hiring an impersonator. There was a bigger picture here. Scams like this didn't happen in isolation. If someone could manipulate a situation to target him, they could easily do the same to others. Alex couldn't let that slide. After breakfast, he picked up the phone and dialed his old friend at the police department again. "Hey, it's me," Alex said when the call connected. "I've got some new information. Turns out my neighbor admitted to hiring that guy who came to my house. But I think we need to dig deeper. This feels like part of something larger." His friend agreed. "We're already looking into similar complaints from other neighborhoods. Your case might help us tie things together. Keep me updated if anything else happens." Alex hung up and leaned back in his chair, thinking hard. He knew the authorities would handle the legal side of things, but he also felt responsible for protecting his community. Willow Creek Estates was supposed to be a safe, peaceful place. It wasn't fair for people to live in fear of scams or intimidation tactics. Alex decided then and there that he wouldn't stop until he made sure everyone in the neighborhood understood how to spot fraud and how to protect themselves. Later that day, Alex paid another visit to Mr. Grady. This time, he wasn't there to argue or confront. Instead, he carried a folder filled with documents, copies of HOA guidelines, examples of legitimate badges, and tips on spotting scams. When Mr. Grady opened the door, he looked surprised to see Alex standing there so soon after their last conversation. "I'm not here to fight," Alex said calmly, holding up the folder. "I'm here to make sure this doesn't happen again. To either of us." Mr. Grady hesitated before stepping aside to let Alex in. The tension between them was still palpable, but there was a hint of curiosity in Mr. Grady's expression. Once they were seated in the living room, Alex placed the folder on the coffee table and opened it. "This is everything you need to know about avoiding scams like the one you fell for. Hiring Jenkins might have seemed like a harmless way to get back at me, but trust me, it could have gotten you into serious trouble." Mr. Grady frowned, flipping through the papers. "You're really going to help me after all this?" "It's not about helping you," Alex replied honestly. "It's about keeping the neighborhood safe. If more people fall for these kinds of tricks, everyone suffers. Besides, I don't hold grudges. Just promise me you'll think twice before doing something stupid like this again." To Alex's surprise, Mr. Grady nodded sincerely. "All right. You're right, I messed up. I'll apologize publicly like you asked." "Good," Alex said, standing up. "And remember, next time you've got a problem, try talking to me instead of trying to hire someone to cause trouble. We might actually solve it without making things worse." With that, Alex left Mr. Grady's house and headed straight to the local community center. Over the years, the center had become a hub for neighborhood meetings, potlucks, and social events. Alex figured it was the perfect place to spread awareness about the scam and educate his neighbors. He called ahead to reserve the space for an evening gathering, then spent the rest of the day preparing a presentation. That night, a small crowd gathered in the community center's main hall. Some attendees were curious, others skeptical, but most seemed genuinely interested in learning more about what Alex had to say. As he stood in front of the group, Alex felt a familiar sense of purpose, the same feeling he used to get when addressing a courtroom or briefing his team during his days as a sheriff. "Thanks for coming tonight," Alex began, smiling warmly at the audience. "I'm sure you're wondering why I called this meeting. Well, recently I had an experience that made me realize how vulnerable we can be, even in a quiet neighborhood like ours. Someone claiming to be from the HOA showed up at my door, flashing a fake badge and making false accusations. At first I thought it was just a random scam, but as I dug deeper, I discovered it was part of a targeted attempt to intimidate me." He paused, letting his words sink in. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Alex continued. "The person behind it turned out to be a neighbor with a personal vendetta. While that issue has been resolved, it made me realize something important. None of us are immune to scams or manipulation, and if we don't take steps to protect ourselves, it could happen to anyone here." Alex went on to explain the warning signs of imposters, things like overly aggressive behavior, lack of proper identification, and vague answers to straightforward questions. He showed pictures of real badges versus counterfeit ones, pointing out subtle differences that most people wouldn't notice unless they knew what to look for. He also shared stories from other communities where similar scams had caused chaos, emphasizing the importance of staying vigilant. By the end of the presentation, the room was buzzing with conversation. Several neighbors approached Alex to thank him for bringing attention to the issue. One woman even admitted that she'd encountered someone resembling Jenkins a few months earlier, but hadn't thought much of it at the time. "You may have saved me from falling for something like this in the future," she said gratefully. As the crowd dispersed, Alex felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He hadn't just solved a personal problem, he'd helped strengthen the entire neighborhood. Word of his efforts quickly spread throughout Willow Creek Estates, earning him newfound respect from residents who had previously only known him as the quiet retired sheriff. But Alex wasn't done yet. Knowing that education was key to prevention, he volunteered to host monthly workshops at the community center. These sessions covered topics ranging from recognizing scams to understanding property rights and resolving disputes peacefully. His goal was simple: empower his neighbors with the knowledge they needed to stay safe and united. Over time, Alex became a trusted figure in the community, not just because of his past career, but because of his willingness to step up and make a difference. People started approaching him with questions or concerns, knowing he'd listen and offer practical advice. In many ways, it felt like he'd found a second calling, a chance to serve his community in a new capacity. Still, Alex never forgot the lesson he'd learned from the Jenkins incident. No matter how peaceful life seemed, there would always be challenges lurking beneath the surface. And while he couldn't prevent every problem, he could arm himself, and those around him, with the tools to face them head-on. In the weeks that followed, Alex noticed a shift in the neighborhood. People who had once kept to themselves now greeted each other with smiles and waves. Conversations at the mailbox or over backyard fences became opportunities to share tips on staying vigilant. The sense of community grew stronger, thanks in no small part to Alex's efforts. His workshops weren't just about scams. They were about fostering trust and cooperation among neighbors. One sunny Saturday morning, Alex was tending to his garden when a young couple approached him. They looked nervous, but determined. "Excuse me," the man said hesitantly. "We heard you've been helping people around here with, well, spotting troublemakers. We think we might have run into one." Alex set down his gardening tools and gave them his full attention. "Tell me what happened," he said gently. The couple explained that a man claiming to be from the utility company had shown up at their door earlier that week. He'd insisted on inspecting their electrical wiring, citing safety concerns. Something about his demeanor had made them uneasy, so they'd politely refused. But since then they'd been second-guessing their decision, wondering if they'd missed an important warning. Alex listened carefully, nodding as they spoke. When they finished, he smiled reassuringly. "You did the right thing by trusting your instincts. A legitimate utility worker would never pressure you into letting them inside without proper notice or identification. If this guy comes back, don't hesitate to call the police or me." The couple visibly relaxed. "Thank you," the woman said gratefully. "It's good to know someone like you is looking out for us." As they walked away, Alex felt a swell of pride. This was why he'd decided to stay active in the community, to make sure everyone felt safe and supported. It wasn't about being a hero. It was about creating a network where people could rely on each other. Later that day, Alex received a call from his friend at the police department. "We caught Jenkins," the officer announced. "Turns out he's been running similar scams all over town. Thanks to your tip, we were able to track him down and connect him to several cases." "That's great news," Alex replied, genuinely pleased. "What about the person who hired him?" "We're still investigating," the officer admitted. "But based on what you told us about your neighbor, it seems like Jenkins was working freelance most of the time. Still, we'll keep digging until we get to the bottom of it." Alex hung up feeling satisfied. Justice was slowly taking its course, and the neighborhood was safer because of it. More importantly, the incident served as a wake-up call, not just for Alex, but for everyone in Willow Creek Estates. Fraudsters relied on people's fear and ignorance to succeed. By shining a light on their tactics, Alex had helped dismantle that advantage. Over the next few months, life in the neighborhood returned to its usual rhythm. The streets remained quiet, the lawns stayed manicured, and the air buzzed with friendly chatter. But beneath the surface, something fundamental had changed. Neighbors were more aware, more connected, and more willing to stand up for one another. Alex's workshops continued to draw crowds not because people expected trouble, but because they wanted to be prepared. One evening, as Alex sat on his porch watching the sunset, Mr. Grady walked by. To Alex's surprise, the man stopped and cleared his throat awkwardly. "Hey," he said, shuffling his feet. "I just wanted to say thanks for everything." Alex raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Thanks for what?" "For not holding a grudge," Mr. Grady admitted, "and for teaching me how to handle things better. I know I messed up big time, but you didn't rub it in my face. You actually helped me see the bigger picture." Alex chuckled softly. "We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them and moving forward." Mr. Grady nodded, looking almost relieved. "Anyway, just thought I'd say it. See you around." As he walked away, Alex couldn't help but smile. Even someone as stubborn as Mr. Grady had learned a valuable lesson. That was the beauty of standing up for what was right. It didn't just solve problems, it inspired change. By the end of the year, Alex had become a local legend of sorts. People often joked that having a retired sheriff in the neighborhood was like having a guardian angel. Whenever someone needed advice, support, or simply a listening ear, Alex was there. His home became a kind of unofficial headquarters for resolving disputes and sharing information. But despite the praise, Alex remained humble. For him, it wasn't about recognition. It was about doing what felt natural. Protecting others had always been his calling, whether he wore a badge or not. And now, in his own quiet corner of the world, he'd found a way to continue serving without ever stepping foot in a patrol car. On New Year's Eve, as fireworks lit up the sky and cheers echoed through the streets, Alex stood outside with his neighbors, a warm cup of cocoa in hand. Someone tapped him on the shoulder and handed him a small plaque. It read, "To our neighborhood hero, for keeping us safe and strong." Alex laughed, shaking his head. "I'm no hero," he said modestly. "Just a guy trying to do the right thing." But deep down, he knew the truth. Heroes came in many forms. Not all of them wore capes or carried guns. Sometimes they were ordinary people who chose to act when others looked away. And in Willow Creek Estates, Alex Carter had proven that even in retirement, a true protector never truly hung up their badge.